to share could you
Right.
enable the sharing of screen?
Oh, yes, absolutely. There we are.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, so just bear with me one moment while I just get up the presentation and get us into slideshow mode. Okay. So thank you very much indeed, Sanat, for your very kind introduction, and welcome everybody. I hope you'll strap yourselves in that we're going to go on a bit of a trip around some various mediations, some of which are covered within the article that's on the IMAW website. So I will now go through just a brief introduction of how I've gathered these insights clearly as a mediator and an arbitrator, but mostly as a mediator, as an investigator within the NHS, as well as a mediator, and then with the Home Office as a mentor and theologian, and then as a faith community leader. So the faith community leader is, of course, Muslims, and I hasten to add that Muslim women in the main, but more recently has become men as well, which I'm delighted about. So I now teach Quran to an all-male class. Every single week, and then separately to an all-female class. So for some of you, you'll understand what a wonderful opportunity that is, because it's quite rare for a woman to be teaching men. So now coming into the universality of the origins of conflict. So this is my thoughts, that over the mediations, through the mediations of the past 17 years, this is what I've come to understand is the constant theme, that a mismatch of expectations leads to dislocation of communication. Alongside that, there will be disappointment, resentment, and then the unresolved conflict, and they just feed each other, going round and round the loop. More disappointment, more resentment, more mismatch in the expectations of how you expected the other party to behave. So really today, my talk is going to be about what role a mediator has, because many of us are very familiar with commercial mediation, where often the presentation of the problem are the issues at hand. So a breach of contract, for instance, that's how the problem is, or the dispute is presented to you. So in my times as a doctor, understanding that a headache could simply be a stress headache, a sugar headache, or it could be the first signs of a tumor, one in mediation needs to delve deeper. So for instance, you could have, and these are some of the cases that are outlined within a course that we deliver annually, Spencer and I, who Spencer is here too, Bridging Extreme Differences, which I'll speak a little bit about further later. But in a dispute, a commercial dispute between somebody who is white English and somebody who is Asian Muslim, and how a breach of contract, in this case it was perhaps promissory estoppel as well involved in it, where where the restaurant owners, this English chap and the Asian chap, owned a restaurant together as shareholders, and the problem was first presented to me as that he promised, that the English chap promised that he would buy the Asian chap's shares in the restaurant. So that's how it was presented initially. So I thought, okay, let's go and explore what was said, why he believes that a promise was made, and for the Asian guy, and the other guy, no, it wasn't. So Asian guy, Mr. Khan, English guy, Mr. Smith. And so here you have all these issues that can lie underneath. So underneath the presenting problem, issues of race, issues of religion, issues of culture. And sometimes you will find that the most important issue here is, in this particular case, Mr. Smith and Mr. Khan, is the religion. So the problem for Mr. Khan, the really deep entrenched problem for him was that he did not want to be able to take out a mortgage to buy another property because of his religion, his religious belief being that mortgages are not permissible because of usury. For Mr. Khan as well, culturally, if you're chatting to somebody, it doesn't need to be really serious. Just in the chatting about buying the business, that was enough for him to act on and to go ahead and to put a deposit on another property. Race wasn't so much at the fore here, but it can be in many different disputes, and we'll go over a few of them in a moment. They can be overwhelming because you're not really sure, you can't see the wood for the trees because so many different issues are popping up, or there's an entrenched position that you can't unlock. So it can be quite overwhelming at times, and you can be, guys, please, let's just calm down. Let's go start back again to understand what's going on in the dispute. So responding to cultural and religious issues, I have found in my practice and with colleagues as well, that there is a discomfort about embracing the elephant in the room if the elephant is culture or religion, because I have found that many of my colleagues are worried about offending. And the difficulty is that if you don't embrace, if you don't tackle the issues at hand, you will find that the dispute remains locked, or it is only resolved at a certain level. So sometimes when something arises, you'll find that lawyers, mediators will not want to speak about it, or just ignore it, or don't want to hear about it, etc. So just taking us to a little bit of an academic aspect of this now, that Sarah Cobb et al. Put together with some colleagues of hers some thoughts about conflict and how it leads to war. So Epoch 1, they called the different stages Epoch. So Epoch 1 is issue focus, very similar to commercial mediation, where the role of the mediator is to identify the issues and then go through the issues one by one or in groups of issues to be able to resolve them. So that was, I suppose, triggered or inspired by the Cold War, thinking about what happened in the Cold War. There were certain national geographical resources, that kind of thing, that brought about the Cold War. Of course, there was an underlying suspicion as well, but many will say that it was driven by resources. Then Epoch 2, relationship focus, where there are individual core concerns. And this was the distillation of the Rwandan and Bosnian conflicts, where there was difficulty in coexistence. So I hasten to add that this is a very simplistic distillation. But yeah, there were individual core concerns there. I would say that there were also cultural concerns as well. But coming on to Epoch 3, where the issues at hand were culture focused, that there was a collective core of concerns. And that was the war on terror post 9/11, that everybody was concerned about that. And one thinks about the pandemic and what the outcomes are of the pandemic, and Brexit as well. There are also some common traits that have arisen in conflicts during the pandemic in commercial entities that have broken down. We've seen big power giants that are now dissolving. So what role does the mediator play? So this is really the core of it. So when we're speaking about issues, so you're thinking generally that you want a signed agreement. So generally, most commercial mediations, a mediator will go in with an expectation that there will be a signed agreement. And there are tangible issues. It's about a breach of contract. It's about particular, perhaps, ownership of various property. And for me, in terms of my mediation practice, that has also been the case. But what I'm wanting to discuss with you today is how, yes, it can present as an issue, tangible issues where there's going to be a signed agreement, but it can be a lot more complicated. So even with FGM, which is covered in the article in detail, that the expectation of the parties was that and myself initially, was that there would be an agreement, a written agreement that the mother would not ever consider traveling abroad for the purpose of performing FGM on her daughter, nor would she seek to do so here in the UK. And of course, this is a criminal matter, and one thinks about, how possible is it to even have a signed agreement to not do something that is criminal. So that was a stretch of what I had experienced before, doing boundary disputes and various other things. And then more recently, the Windrush, again, all that was required by, on the face of it, by the complainants was citizenship. They just wanted their papers to be regularized, to have passports so that they could travel, be recognized as citizens, have access to medical facilities, and all the other benefits of being a citizen. The mosque, again, presented as, we just want them to move. We just want the nuisance to desist. So this was some neighbors surrounding a mosque, and the neighbors were not Muslim, and they did not appreciate having a mosque with late night prayers and people speaking in different languages and dressing very differently and atrocious parking. So in that particular instance, I started with the parking because the parking is a tangible issue. So that's how it's presented as a nuisance, but there were lots of other underlying issues, as I've alluded to. Moving on to relationship, that often, particularly David Richbell, God rest his soul, really highlighted this, and we wrote a chapter together a few years ago about relationship. So not just looking at the issues, but also seeking to restore the relationship between the parties. ADHD is a case that is covered in the article. Where a child of 14 at that time and mother had become estranged, living in the same home, but the child, we'll call him Mustafa as in the article, was very, very aggrieved, very resentful of his mother because she had sent him to Pakistan to keep him safe from criminality in the UK. And unfortunately, he became quite radicalized in Pakistan. And this is not to stereotype that if children are sent to Pakistan, that they immediately become radicalized. It's in this particular instance. And there, the improved relationship was what I sought to achieve. Clearly, there was a very concerning aspect when this child was referring to his mother as a kafir, as a non-believer, using many expletives, and yet talking about jihad, when actually your respect for your mother and parents in general is at the forefront of the tenets of Islam, and yet he felt that he was being a good Muslim and wanted to go to Syria. So there was, of course, a huge load of other issues, but the most important there, in my view, was the relationship between mother and son to be a protective factor. University staff, that this was another case not covered in the article, where there were a group of a team who were on a bus one day, part of the team were on a bus one day, not aware of each other. And two of the team were talking about Muslims when their manager was Muslim and sitting up front, they hadn't noticed that she was there, and they were talking in, let's say, very skeptical and critical terms about Muslims and culture of Muslims, practice of Muslims, and some stereotypes. Didn't realize that she was there. They were horrified when later they realized, and then it was a matter of whether the university could take responsibility or not, because they weren't on the university premises, they were on their way home. But clearly the university, by appointing me, wanted to resolve the matter rather than going through courts about that. Then under this section, GP receptionist, that a GP from Nigeria, again, not seeking to stereotype, said to the receptionist, you know, he was clicking his fingers when he wanted her to bring notes in, and she really found that objectionable. And she called him a male chauvinistic pig. Now, the GP was recoiling because, you know, calling him a pig was just too much for him as a Muslim. And in the mediation, I said to him that, look, you know, I understand that you're hurt by this, but the term is male chauvinistic pig. It's not male chauvinistic horse. And so, you know, please understand that, yes, the receptionist was very upset with you, very aggrieved that you were treating her in this way. You thought that there was nothing wrong with clicking your fingers. She found that really objectionable. And so it was about the relationship, even though it was presented as an Islamophobic situation. Then moving lastly to culture, this is the area of mediation practice, which I'm really, really pleased that others as well are going to be talking about this tomorrow. There's going to be a debate, so I'm very, very pleased about that, because what I say is that whereas a mediator for the issues type of situation, so commercial, lot of commercial cases, would be there as the analytical friend, looking at identifying the issues, helping to build trust between the parties, and then reaching resolution. And relationship is going a bit deeper to identify what's happened in the past, what's valued by each party about the other personally, not just the business. Culture is a whole other level. So transformation of understanding. So I'm just going to highlight a case which many of you may have heard me talk about before, so I apologize for that, but I think it really makes the point that I was appointed in the days of the mediation platform, where the courts had just put through, there was a scheme, and so this was about maybe 8 years ago now. So I was appointed, so to speak, blind, in that I was just allocated to this case. And it was a landlord-tenant case. And the party, one of the parties contacted me the day before the mediation just to give me the heads up to say, so we'll just call him Mr. B, to give the heads up that the other party, party A, was Muslim. And he said, you know, I don't know how much experience you have of dealing with Muslim people, but they can be jolly slippery. So, you know, I paused, of course, it was over the phone fortuitously. He couldn't see me wringing my hands as I said, I think I'll be all right. I think I've got enough experience of dealing with Muslim people. And then fast forwarding to the next day, where Mr. B was absolutely horrified. Him and his wife were both horrified to see that, in fact, I'm overtly Muslim, visibly Muslim. And, you know, he, I'm sure, felt really embarrassed. And he questioned whether I was the appropriate mediator, not because of my credentials, my mediation credentials, but professional credentials, but because of who I am. And so in that situation, it would have been possible, as my colleagues were telling me the day before, you know, just report him to the CMC, you know, this is outrageous, how could he say such a thing to you, etc., etc. So that was a possibility, but because I was seeking to transform, to walk towards that prejudice, to change this person's mind and his wife as well, about who Muslims are, not as a sort of campaign, but just to give them the opportunity to experience me and other Muslims in a different way. So shame-triggered violence, coming back to the paper now, the article, there's a case there which if you're interested you can read about a lady, Noria, who marries her sister's ex-husband. So if we think back to that slide about religion, race, culture, where, you know, legally there's nothing wrong with a woman marrying her sister's ex-husband. In terms of religion, there's nothing wrong with that. There's not a racial element to it. But culturally, this was seen as a heinous crime. And there was a demand for justice, and the justice was that if Noria ever came to the family home, that they would kill her, because she had threatened their identity meaning who they saw themselves as in the frame of the community. So this is no longer just an individual, you know, who am I, who is my mother, that we were talking about in the ADHD or university staff or GP receptionist. This is more about who am I in the community, that we will hang our heads low forever if anybody in the community finds out about this, that our daughter has no honor, you know, that she is willing to marry her sister's ex-husband when, you know, that's really a shameful thing, because if it didn't work out with the sister, the husband should be a no-go zone. Moving on to end of life, so very different. Here, when parents of a Muslim child, often, this is a scenario, I have done some non-Muslim, but often Muslim child, and the life support system needs to be turned off in terms of the legal framework, the medical and legal framework. So it's considered to be in the best interests of the child. I've done a couple of adults where it is considered that there is no prospect of there being any improvement in the illness, and also that the patient is suffering. So in this scenario, again, the parents are often, whatever their religion, whatever their culture, there will be a deep sense of guilt and fear. But when there are ethnic groups as well, and particularly my experience of Muslim communities, there will be this whole other level, which is about how will I be seen before God? So that's not a tangible issue. How will I be seen in the community? And the fear of being seen as sinful by God is a huge obstacle. And so what I do in that scenario is that I switch from mediator to coach. So I teach Quran on a weekly basis, contextualizing Quran from its sort of orthodox roots and the application today. And so speaking to parents and saying that Allah, God, writes the day that we are going to die. So it is not you who is allowing your child to be murdered. And in one case, in 2017, when the life support was turned off, the child actually survived for 3 months, but nevertheless survived when the life support was turned off. So again, that made the point even more further that, you know, the end of life is written by God in that particular instance. That's what really helped to unlock that conflict. And then in probate, again, there will be some communities where even though, for instance, Islam is their religion, culture trumps, so to speak. I'm glad I can use that word now without cringing. So culture trumps religion, so that in actual fact, men will only inherit. even though Islam says that men and women will inherit. And so often there will be difficulties around that. And there's also a concept of women inheriting half of what men inherit. So there's often some issues there where diaspora in the UK are not happy about women inheriting half. So we have culture, religion in the mix there. If you saw it as an elephant in the room, there's a whole herd of elephants. So really, what can we do about this? And my suggestions are, before I open to the floor, is to read the article if you're interested, and then to join BIMA, because we speak about relevant matters every single month. And the next one is on the 1st of December at 8:30 in the morning. And that's on how does identity influence a person's sense of shame. And then lastly, we'll be able to confirm the details at soon, we hope, in December about our next residential course. There may be somebody here who's attended it before. It's called Bridging Extreme Differences, where we cover loads of cases, all the ones that I've mediated before, and speak about how culture and how the mediator's role is different from just looking at the issues and helping the parties to reach an agreement just based on the issues. There's a lot more to it in terms of the transformation that's required. So that's me done. And I'd be very, very happy to receive any questions from you.
Thank you very much for that, Zaza. It was very informative. I myself, being a Muslim, found it very informative as well. And actually, if possible, it would be really great to take down some contact details from you, because I'm actually looking to start up my mediation practice in a mosque as well. So I think it would be really interesting to speak with yourself and perhaps learn from your experiences, and share your wisdom if possible. So thank you very much for that. I'm just going to go through any questions that have been put forward by people on the chat. I think we have a first question from Kishore Deer. He says, in your analysis, is there any scope for culture and or religion in a dispute arising out of reluctance of somebody to undergo COVID-19 vaccinations?
Yes, absolutely. So that's more about culture than religion, because culture will say, no, don't take it. So in my work with Windrushians, there was a lot of resistance to vaccination. And the idea there was, look, why is it us who are dying more from COVID? There's some conspiracy going on here, and the vaccine might kill Black people rather than anybody else. So there was a lot of nervousness, conspiracy, suspicion around vaccination. Islamically, Christianity-wise, Judaism-wise, there may be, particularly for Judaism and Islam, that there may be nervousness about what products are within the vaccine. So there will be a nervousness about pork products, for instance. And the Quran is very, very clear, and so is the Torah, that it's the eating of the pork that is the issue, and where there are medicinal purposes, it's about the lesser of two evils. So I lost my mother in February due to COVID, and she was just about to be vaccinated, and I'm able to share that story that if you don't have it, what can happen, that it can be really, really awful, very difficult way of dying. So yes, so definitely culture and religion can play a part there. And it's really about, Kishore, not criticizing. So coming again as that non-judgmental mediator, which runs through all types of mediations, to be non-judgmental, not to say, now come on, for the love of God, be sensible, that sort of thing, but really to seek to understand. So even if you are, the absolutely diametric diametrically opposite in your viewpoint, whether it's about vaccination or FGM, for instance, being willing to reveal of yourself is one, you know, to a certain extent, as much as you're safe to do that. So for instance, in the FGM that I revealed that, you know, I was really angry with my mother, God rest her soul, for not allowing me to go through that process, because I wanted to be circumcised because everybody else in the class was being circumcised. So it's being willing to share of yourself where relevant, and to, whereas sometimes some mediation courses will say, you know, don't reveal anything of your personal life or your personal experience. So I think that it's really important in dismantling and disentangling myths to, you know, have a bit of humor, to have obviously seriousness where appropriate, about what you've been through and what others have been through in anonymous terms.
Thank you for that. I just forgot to hit stop recording, so I'm just going to do that now.